When time is not on your side, the last thing you want to do is neglect your wellness. With just 20 minutes a day, you can maximize your training to improve your heart and get pumped. Listen on, Maximal Beings, for Heart Health Part 2 with Dr. Ankur Kalra.
Welcome to Maximal Being, a GI doc and ICU nurse that break down the science so you can exceed your gut health, nutrition, and fitness goals. So, let's smash the broscience and optimizing your health with your hosts, Doc Mock and RN Graham.
So, RN Graham, what do you eat for breakfast to get into physique competition strength and to power your night shift whenever your breakfast may be? And do you eat heart healthy grains as a part of your diet?
I mean, I eat my Wheaties. What else am I supposed to eat? Wheaties and Cheerios, people. Listen, that is a very, very important topic. You see all these things about, Cheerios, or, these, a lot of these brand cereals. And don't get me wrong, compared to some of the alternatives, yes, they are better than some alternatives. But for myself, I'm a veggie guy. I'm a fruits guy. I am a big believer in, I do eat eggs, and what I do is I'll eat a few eggs and I'll toss in some veggies in there. I'll do my spinach, I'll do some kale, and I will have like grapefruit or something with a lower glycemic index, and that's what I use for my carbs. But as far as breakfast cereals go, like Doc Mock said, you got to read the labels and see what you're really putting into your body. How do you guys feel about that?
Ankur, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm meeting Graham for the first time, but that's exactly what I eat for my breakfast. Actually, it's for those who know me, it's fairly boring, but it's fairly consistent. I have a veggie omelet, every morning for breakfast, and I've sort of had that for years. It's spinach, it's tomatoes, bell peppers, 2 eggs, black pepper, and a little bit of salt. So that's my breakfast, and that's a good mix of protein and carbs, and vegetables, obviously. And then I pair with it the good old PBJ. So, so what I do is the bread is actually a multigrain bread. I get it from Whole Foods now. I'm not on the stock for Whole Foods, guys. I don't owe any stock options with Whole Foods, but it's a really, really good bread. It's just a multigrain bread. I think it's made out of different kinds of seeds and of plant origin. So I put the crunchy peanut butter, the one, you get the peanut butter. So even with peanut butter, there's processed and there's, raw peanut butter. So the peanut butter, which is raw, you'll see that the oil actually collects at the top. That's the one that you want to get because that's just raw peanut butter. So I put that, and then I put a natural preserve, from either a berry. So it gives me a good kick of sugar in the morning. Again, very balanced. Not the sugar surge you need from a cereal. But so that's my breakfast, and then I would usually get some fruit with it. So for those who think that breakfast is actually not important, that it's okay to skip breakfast, the answer is no. There's actually a study which was published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, which looked at cardiovascular mortality. Schaefer, this is interesting. I'm happy to share the paper with you. So they looked at a group of breakfast eaters versus no breakfast eaters. So heavy breakfast eaters versus, just sort of, barely eating breakfast eaters versus no breakfast eaters. And what they found was the mortality, guess what, was the lowest in people who had the healthiest, like the largest breakfast. And not only that, they also looked at calcium scores. So they looked at long-term calcium scores, which is, it's a marker of plaque in blood vessels that run on the surface of the heart. And they found that people who actually ate breakfast in the morning regularly had the lowest volume of plaque burden in their coronaries compared with those who barely ate breakfast, compared with those who actually thought that eating breakfast was not was not a healthy habit or not a good option. So it's very important to have, a good breakfast. Now, when you can have that breakfast is another, I think is another point in discussion. And for me, intermittent fasting is when I can include the hours when I'm actually sleeping, so that I don't have to be hungry during the day when I'm working or trying to be productive, because I like to be well fed when I'm working. So what I would typically do is I would have the last meal of the day at either at 6 or at 7 in the evening, and I wouldn't eat anything after that. And then I wouldn't eat anything in the morning before 9. So that's a good 14. I always push for 16, but getting like 16 is the perfect duration of intermittent fasting. Right? If you can only eat for 8 hours and not eat for 16 hours, that's the recommended. Or I shouldn't say the recommended. I think that's the goal for all intermittent fasters out there. But if you can get to 14, at least I think it's a little. I'm pushing myself a little when I'm going to 16, but 14 is very doable. So I tend not to eat anything. I could have water, that's fine. I could have coffee in the morning, that's fine. Not a latte or not a cappuccino or not like a frappuccino. One of those sugar
Starbucks coffees.
Yes, just plain old regular black coffee. You can have that. You can have tea. Just like tea in warm water. You can have water, but don't eat anything. If you can do that, like for 14 to 16 hours, it's been shown to boost immunity, lower infection rates. Actually, you become a fast metabolizer, extremely efficient metabolizer, and you sort of start recruiting stem cells to regenerate muscle and other diseased organs. So there was a New England Journal of Medicine review article on this, which was incredible. I thought this was the New England Journal moving in the right direction. So that's what I tend to do. Personally, I'm sort of trying to share things that I do myself, and experiments that I've tried myself in person, and the ones that I feel have worked for me. That's what I do. And then if you can do that and take care of all the dietary habits, and then sort of then get into high intensity interval training, that's all you really need. That's the prescription for the best cardiovascular health. But I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, our last podcast actually was exactly about intermittent fasting and the data behind it. And that New England Journal paper is a must read for all the listeners out there for sure. I do 16 and 8 personally. So I, in theory, skip breakfast, but my next meal is breakfast, and then I'll wait a little bit in between cases, and then I'll eat lunch, and I'll kind of keep grazing throughout the day, and ultimately eat around 2,800 to 3,200 calories in a day. But compressed, and it definitely works well for me. So I don't think grains are evil, but not all grains are created equally, right? So if you're having the common form of wheat here in America is called dwarf wheat, which was actually cultivated to grow in better conditions. If you leave our ancestral wheat and let it grow, at some point in time when it gets to be a suitable level, it may collapse on itself or its neighbors. And so actually, scientists have genetically modified this type of dwarf wheat to grow to a specific stature so that it can be cultivated and retain that caloric value, not necessarily nutritional value, but caloric value. And that is majority of the wheat that's out there. And it does lack a certain nutritional value. And also a lot of farmers will use pesticides in these things. And we don't know the effects of what that has on our heart. We've talked about this briefly, but in the paleo literature, so we know that our ancestors did eat some form of grains, but again, not all grains are created equally. My wife and I prescribe to mostly oats, due to I don't have gluten problems, but it is gluten-free and they tend to be relatively clean and non-genetically modified. And then we also do a type of grain called spelt. Spelt is not a common grain, but it actually has more protein and fiber than quinoa or most of the other very popular healthy grains. Aaron, Graham, what sort of grains do you have when you do grab for a grain?
I do a lot of brown rice. I do quinoa a lot. I'm a big fan of quinoa because it's easy and quick to make. 10 minutes you have a pot of quinoa. I do a lot of oats, especially steel oats. I do like steel oats. I leave it in the fridge overnight, and it's ready in the morning. And I would say that. Also, if I do bread, which I don't, I'm not a bread person, but if I'm making, say myself, a little sandwich in the morning, I do a lot of Ezekiel bread. But otherwise than that, I'm not someone that does, white bread, or I don't do wheat bread, for the things that you just said. So that's when it comes to grains, that's the grains I jump to.
Yeah, and I think glycemic timing is also important. When if your goal is fat loss and you stop your natural ketogenic process that happens when you're fasting or sleeping, and add in a carbohydrate, you will stop the ketogenic process and you will stop your natural fat burning. And that's what most people have for breakfast, right? Our grains. But if you continue that process with eggs or with nuts or with avocado, something that has some fat and has some protein, it's going to keep you full longer. So you're not going to snack midday. And then also you're going to continue through that ketogenic fat burning process. So I think, keeping to the Mediterranean principles, and staying within those good glycemic carbohydrates, if like vegetables, and then having your good fats is important. Now, Dr. Kalra did allude to a very important part of cardiovascular health, which is cardiovascular fitness. And he mentioned high intensity interval training. We do know that there are recommendations set forth by the CDC for exercise. And essentially what they want is for you to exercise about twice a week. Or a total of about 150 minutes in a week if you can. And what they say is a moderate intensity exercise. Moderate intensity exercise is defined as the Duke protocol, which is about 64% to 76% of your 220 minus your age in your heart rate. That's what's considered a good amount of exercise. But you didn't mention moderate intensity exercise, Dr. Kalra. You mentioned high intensity interval training. Why do you do that and not just moderate intensity?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think so. Different people have different goals, and you could do moderate intensity, and that's fine. I think if you have to increase your cardiovascular fitness, so if you have to sort of tune the cardiovascular health for better autonomic function, which I think is going to have its impact on, how you, process your food intake, or, how active you are, what kind of muscle mass you have, and what kind of cardiovascular fitness you have. You sort of have to push the limit and do high intensity interval training. Now, I'm not saying that because that's my belief. I'm saying that because there's data to support that. One of the strongest evidence was generated by a group in Dallas at UT Southwestern. They did a study, and these are on individuals, who were, both exercise naive and exercise non-naive, and they subjected them to sort of a regime or a regimen of high intensity interval training, which, by the way, only has to be several minutes. It has to be maybe 24 minutes of high intensity interval training. Is pretty intense, actually, if you ask me, or anyone else who does high intensity interval training. If you can do that nonstop for 24 minutes, that's quite the workout. It's tough to sustain longer than 24 minutes. Sort of what the theory of Orange theory also is, and is a place I go to now. Again, I don't have any stock options in Orange theory, but I do think that their principle is sort of, I wouldn't say is randomized controlled trial evidence, but I do think there's good observational data, supporting their principle. But what I was trying to get at was, so in that study, what they showed was that the persistent benefits of exercise, when it comes to weight loss and maintenance of weight loss, and improved cardiovascular health, and improved arterial stiffness, and sustained reduction in blood pressure, all these effects, and obviously, I don't think they don't maybe don't quote me on this. I don't think they actually looked at major adverse cardiovascular events, but it's something that they want to look at is, did it eventually mitigate stroke risk and heart attack risk? But all the other parameters that I mentioned, so arterial stiffness, which we know has been shown to correlate with clinical outcomes, sustained reduction in blood pressure, which we know has been shown to be correlated with outcomes like we discussed at the beginning of the podcast. Weight loss, some people, there is actually data out there which now classifies obesity as a risk factor for heart disease. It has not traditionally been a risk factor for heart disease. There's been association, like obesity would lead to insulin resistance, would lead to, high triglycerides, and insulin resistance long-term will cause diabetes. Diabetes is a known risk factor, but obesity in and of itself has never been shown to be directly impacting heart disease. But there's data out there now, which has shown that obesity in and of itself is an independent risk factor for heart disease. So when I'm actually assessing someone's cardiovascular risk, and if someone is obese, I put that as a risk factor for heart disease in my clinic notes. So that study showed was that people who were subjected to high intensity interval training versus people who were just training without any high intensity component, fared worse. And the high intensity interval training folks fared a lot better. So if you have to invest in exercise, but that's also a mindset, right? If you want to do something right. That's my mindset. And I think if you want to get into exercising, and if you want to be serious about it, then you should do a part of your exercise should be high intensity interval training. So not all of it has to be. Different people have different goals. Some want to be buff, and that's fine. And you could be buff, but you could still include a little bit of high intensity interval training. I think you'll be buff and healthy from a cardiovascular standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key difference between moderate intensity and high intensity interval training is time, right? Mm-hmm. There have been studies that have actually compared the two and shown, this was Gillen et al. In 2016, it's published in PLOS ONE. But basically they had similar outcomes, but the difference was it took 5 times more time for the moderate intensity group as compared to the high intensity interval training group. So you're all listening to people that are super busy here, right? RN Graham has kids. He's working 1,000 hours a week. Like, he needs to save time. So that's why he invests time in those short bursts of energy. Exercise has been found to strengthen your cardiovascular system. It can increase your good cholesterol, that's your HDL cholesterol, and lower your triglycerides, one of the bad cholesterols. It can directly change your blood pressure and your heart rate. My resting heart rate's around 50s. Sometimes it gets into the high 40s. And it's because I think I'm well athletically conditioned at this stage in my life. It also decreases inflammation. So inflammation is a big factor for those clots in your arteries, atherosclerosis. And it also can improve your insulin sensitivity and prevent insulin resistance, which is a big lead risk factor for obesity, which is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Now, RN Graham, you and I, we love to weight lift, and Dr. Kalra over there, mentioned a little bit about being buff. Do you lift for cardiovascular health, or is it just, because it's fun and enjoyable, or for the other benefits that we've talked about on our previous podcasts?
No, I definitely lift for cardiovascular health as well. I do a lot of cardio lifting. So what that is I'm not taking those huge, 2-3 minute breaks in between each set or each exercise. What I'm doing is I'm jumping straight into the next exercise. So I'm keeping my heart rate up. Or in between, if I do choose to focus on, trying to gain size, even in between that, I'm jumping rope. I'm doing something to keep my heart rate up. Because just because you're muscular does not mean you're healthy. And especially when it comes to heart health. I know plenty of people out there that they look fantastic. They're cut up. They have the 6-pack and everything. But if you put them on a cardio machine, they struggle. So are they truly healthy? And the answer is no. Yes, you may look a certain way, but just because your body may look a certain way doesn't mean your heart is functioning a certain way. You have a lot of athletes out there that drop dead because they have heart issues. So as far as lifting goes, and this is because I've gotten older and I've become more in tune with what's more important. And to me, what's more important is being able to function, to have my body function well, especially when it comes to cardiovascular health. So I love lifting weights, yes, without a doubt. I can do it every day, all day. But more important than the look is the functionality. So yeah, if I'm lifting, it's gotta include some type of cardio in it as well.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this during our podcast where with GI Jeff and Sharif Ultrafit, where we were talking about compound movements and powerlifting. But a lot of the same benefits that exercise in general has on your cardiovascular system are seen in compound movements like the snatch, like the clean, like the hang. And those are a lot of the fundamental benefits of why CrossFit and those sorts of sports actually do have benefit on your heart directly. And they do implement a lot of the same, aerobic and anaerobic factors that are involved with high intensity interval training. So just to summarize the topic, before we move into a couple of quick listener mails, blood pressure is a huge risk factor for improving your cardiovascular fitness. We talked about the DASH diet and the impact of processed foods on sugar, of grains, on increasing your vegetable intake and fruit intake, and watching what proteins you're selecting on this, as well as your cholesterol. Obesity is an independent risk factor. Exercise is a great way to improve cardiovascular fitness and mitigate some of the risk factors. Whether or not it improves all the outcomes, we're looking for more long-term data in terms of high-intensity interval training. And we will be back after this brief commercial break. Okay, and we're back. The first piece of listener mail we have is from Cam, and he's asking, what are the best techniques for stopping smoking? Dr. Kalra, I'm going to bring this to you first.
So, important question. Clearly a risk factor, which we know has been associated with heart disease, also other diseases. And it's something which I work very aggressively with my patients. I typically would start off with nicotine gums or lozenges. You also get nicotine patches. So I would start off with a 7 or a 14-gram patch, depending on, the smoking burden, every 24 hours. And I would pair it with lozenges or with gums. So I would ask them to chew 1 to 2 gums every 4 hours or whenever they have an urge to smoke. Patients typically do well, with a combination of patches and gums or what have you. Obviously support groups is a great idea, no matter what, new habit you're trying to inculcate or, old habits you're trying to forego. So that's how I typically start. Varenicline or Chantix, which is the brand name, is a medication which, is very effective, no doubt about that, but has some serious side effects, with regard to mental health. So I'm not saying that I'm reticent to prescribing varenicline, but it is not my go-to medication. I would start slow and escalate, depending on how patients do. Some patients do really, really well with just lozenges or gums and then patches. And before you know it, they've sort of won the battle to stop smoking. That's my take on it. What is yours, Schaefer?
Yeah, I think motivation is a key part of it as well. My dad, when he was stopping smoking many, many years ago, before I was on the earth, basically my mom said, "I'm not going to marry you unless you stop smoking." And he stopped that day, and he hasn't smoked since that time.
That's true love right there, huh?
Right? Absolutely, yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but one more thing which I think is very, very important, and I think is very effective, is if you have a partner who's smoking, the chances of you failing are very high. So I typically have the same conversation with the partner as well. Like, you are both in this together. So you both have to quit smoking at the same time. I've also gone all the way to saying, look, the entire upholstery in the apartment or in the house that you're living has to go, because at times just the residual fragrance of smoke or tobacco is enough to sort of have people fall off the cliff and start smoking again. So again, different strategies work for different people. Again, it really depends on how motivated you are to quitting smoking, like you said, Schaefer.
Yeah, I think smokefree.gov has a lot of great research. There are now apps. There's the Quit Guide and the Quit Start that both can help you kind of through your process, and they have alerts that they can send you. Another factor that people are kind of having issues with nowadays, especially, is the economic impact. Looking at the national averages, a pack of cigarettes, if you're in New York City right now, is like $13 a pack, but on average is around $5 a pack. So if you're smoking a pack a day times 30 days, you're saving about $2,000 a month just by stopping smoking. So when you put it into those dollars and cents, it makes a lot of sense to people. Aaron Graham, what do you think about vaping? Is that a safe alternative?
No, vaping is definitely not a safe alternative to smoking. Listen, before coronavirus, hit the scene, vaping was a major topic. And, you saw in the news all day, every day, why it was important not to vape. So, when it comes to vaping, you're just switching out for something else. So I definitely wouldn't recommend for people to vape. The other thing, when it comes to quitting smoking, I think the most important thing is to have a plan. With anything, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to do it, then you're not going to do it. Whether your plan consists of taking the nicotine gums or, the patch, or, choosing a medication like Chantix, or, just trying to figure out a way for yourself, think positive about it. Think about the fact that I can do this, because quitting smoking is very, very difficult. The addiction to nicotine is real. There's no doubt about that. So it is about motivation. If you think positive, if you think about the reasons why you need to quit, whether it be your spouse, your girlfriend, your children, yourself, the risk that you are putting yourself in because you choose to, smoke. Those things are quite important. Find out where the craving starts. Like, is it stress induced? Do you need to pick up that cigarette after a long day of work? Keep yourself busy is also, I think, a very important thing to help quit smoking. If you are busy, less chances that you have that second to, oh, I got a second, let me, puff on a cigarette. And another thing that that you touched on, Dr. Kalra, was the fact that if you have someone in your household that smokes, that's a big issue. It has to be something that you do together. And if you have friends that smoke, it's time for you to, distance yourself from those friends, because if they smoke, you're going to smoke. So that's, to me, those are the most important things when it comes to quitting. Make a plan first.
Yeah, Cam, 1 year after you stop smoking, your risk of a heart attack drops by about 50%, stroke by 80%, not to mention cancer of basically every single part of your body, definitely throughout the GI tract and lungs. And then, in terms of vaping, JAMA actually did come out with a paper in 2017 that quoted specific cardiovascular risks equal to that of smoking with vaping. So vaping, not good. The next listener mail is from Lamar, and he asked, any tips for boosting immunity? Boy, do we ever. Dr. Kalra.
We sort of talked about this, right? I think the best way to boost immunity is exercise. Is the time. It's timeless. It's proven. It's effective. It's cheap. It works, and I think it's important to invest in an exercise routine which you can follow regularly and religiously. People, you can talk about food items. I'm obviously from India, and there's a lot of science, and there's a lot of food science in Ayurveda, and there are many food items which are thought to be, immunity boosting. But like if you want to marry, food science with the science that you and I know, Schaefer, we really want to see some randomized controlled trial data, and there aren't any. So you can take those for whatever it's worth. Some people are believers and some are not believers. I think if there isn't a harm, then there is no harm in taking those food items or those food substances, or making actually in some of the Indian curries and veggies that we make at home, they're just the part of how those veggies are made. So that being said, I don't think infectious disease is any less in India compared with the rest of the world. It's actually quite the opposite. Even though cardiovascular disease has now become the leading cause of death even in India. So non-communicable diseases have taken over, just like in the US. But I do think that exercise unequivocally is the strongest intervention you can make in boosting immunity.
Aaron Graham, what are you doing to improve your immunity these days?
Trying to get some rest.
Very important.
Yes, I 100% agree with you. To me, it's sleep and rest. Sleep and rest, exercise and rest.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, right now, I do work in the COVID unit a lot, and there's a lot of things that they're throwing at the wall right now. You'll see zinc, vitamin C, all these things that they're throwing at patients to help you boost their immunities. And depending on what research you're looking at, do these things work? Yes, no. It depends on the research that you're looking at. But the thing I see is a lot of these people that are on this, on the unit with COVID, they're overweight. They have diabetes, they have hypertension, and these things lower your immunities. These same people, they're not exercising. If you exercise, you lower your risk of diabetes. You lower your risk of heart disease. You lower your risk of hyperlipidemia. High cholesterol. That's the best antioxidants out there, is getting up, moving, and exercising. And then after you exercise, get yourself some rest so your body can reset. To me, if you want to boost your immunity, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I think sleep is central to pretty much everything wellness and a lot of health things as well, namely because of the stress response, which is mitigated by cortisol, right? And think of cortisol as kind of like an immune system distractor. Your body's going to be in a stress state, and then add on a foreign invader. It's too busy dealing with equilibrating your stress state to fight off the foreign invader properly. And that's just a recipe for a bad infection. So sleep, and sleep. You're right, exercise for sure. And it doesn't even have to be high intensity interval training. It can be things like Tai Chi and yoga. Those actual types of exercises have great benefit for immunity. They've actually looked at immunomarkers before and after these types of exercise and found benefit. And then, in terms of food, so PUFAs, which is polyunsaturated fatty acids, things like fish, are a really great source of immune boosting. And, we talked about the benefit in your heart. And then debatable are a lot of nutritional supplements. I think most Americans are vitamin D deficient, especially here in Ohio. We don't have a sun as a part of our weather plan 90% of the time. So most people are vitamin D deficient. It certainly can't harm you to take a vitamin D supplement. Vitamin C and zinc, I don't know. I mean, there's some people that are giving vitamin C infusions, and I am not for that type of broscience for sure. But if you want to take a vitamin C supplement, it's not going to harm you. So this was a great podcast. I really appreciate, as always, Aaron Graham. And then it was really a pleasure to have Dr. Kalra on the podcast. We definitely have a lot of history, and it's nice to see him in between caths sharing his wellness knowledge with all of you. Dr. Kalra, you have a side hustle though, right? There's something out there that you do on the side that brings you joy. Where can people find that?
I don't know what you're specifically alluding to, but there's so I do poetry. And my first book of poetry was published earlier this year before the pandemic hit. It actually was released on Valentine's Day, and launched in collaboration with the Cleveland Clinic Arts and Medicine Institute, at the Cleveland Clinic. It's titled Ebada, and it's an anthology of poems on love and loss and heartbreak. About 30 poems, and each poem has an accompaniment, which is a hand painted art piece from one of the Ojai, California artists. And it's the message of the book is that if words are a reaction to a particular emotion you're experiencing, then sort of the artwork is the lesson that the universe wants to share with you, or the universe wants to give you, as a manifestation of that emotion. So I think it sort of goes along with your wellness theme. I think mental health and emotional health is extremely important and relevant also. And these are extremely trying times. These are extremely tough times for a lot of us. For a lot of us who have lost jobs, who've lost family members, who are just stressed out looking at what's happening in our happening to our planet, and even in our communities. So the message from the book, and this is, I also published research in this, which got some national attention, and that was broken heart syndrome during the pandemic. But the universal message is to sort of, as they say, body, mind, and spirit, right? So you train the body, so you exercise every day, you master the mind, so you meditate every day, and you enrich the spirit, so you pray every day. So you exercise, you meditate, and you pray. That's sort of the overarching message. Whether it's science or whether it's spirituality, I think the message is the same. And then I have my nonprofit, which is makeadent.org, and we've done some. It was started about a couple of years ago. We launched an app which sort of looks at readmission risk following a particular valve procedure in patients. That one of the valve procedures that I do as an interventionalist. The cardiovascular health for South Asians is something which is very close to my heart, and something that I'm heavily invested in. So we took a group of experts to India last year. We did a conference, sort of like a think tank conference, to get the experts and sort of solve the problem of cardiovascular disease in India. So that paper was published in Circulation earlier this year. And September 16th, it's coming up. I don't know when the podcast will be live. Maybe it's after September 16th, or if it's before that, then September 16th, there's some exciting announcement, in relation to the nonprofit, and, with what we're doing with the Cleveland Clinic and the nonprofit. So stay tuned.
Can you spell the name of your book, and where can people find it?
Yeah, sure. So the book is titled Ebada, I-B, B as in boy, A, D as in Denver, A, H as in hat, Ebada. The website is ebadathebook.com. So people can find it on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, or they could just go to the website, ebadathebook.com, and they can purchase directly from the publisher or from Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So that's the book. And Make a Dent is makeadent.org. Oh, yeah. Thank you, though. Thanks for your interest in those side hustles, Schaefer.
No, thank you. And RN Graham, any parting wisdom for the listeners out there?
Sure. Listen, when it comes to heart health, it, for the most part, can be controlled. And, you've listened to two great healthcare professionals talk about the importance of nutrition, nutrition and exercise. I've learned so much today. So, Dr. Kalra, thank you so much. It was definitely a pleasure having you on. You touched base on so many things. And one of the things that you said was, and you said it really quick, but when it comes to heart disease, it can be controlled. It's not something that most people have to suffer from. Yes, there are those people born with these conditions, but, with diet, exercise, not smoking, these things can be controlled. And, once again, thank you so much. You are amazing in your knowledge when it comes to this stuff.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks for having me. Really, really appreciate the invitation.
For those of you that haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button. Leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at team@maximalbeing.com. And at maximalbeing.com, there is a ton of information, including some stuff on heart disease out there for you. So until next time, this is Doc Mock, and I'm here with RN Graham and Dr. Ankur Kalra, and we are here to maximize your pathway to wellness. Thanks, everybody.
Next week on the Maximal Being
But,
podcast.
we're going to focus on the positive here, right? It's not all doom and gloom, right? We don't have to be like how the news has been recently. And so we're going to come up with some solutions for you. So do us a favor, Maximal Beings, and leave us a comment or review. Hit the subscribe button and let your friends and family know so that we can get the word out. And until next time, this is Doc Mock, and I'm here to maximize your pathway to wellness.